It's streaming.
It should be streaming. Check it, restream.
Streaming, right?
It should be working. Yeah. All right. Okay, you need to get out of that page.
Oh shoot. Yeah. Okay, 10 minutes late. Apologies for that. We had technical issues, but actually, Zoom people, can you hear me before I begin? I see the text box, so I'm assuming you can. Welcome to week 7's writing workshop. This week will be on environmental storytelling. So let's get started. You guys' weeks have been stress-free as possible. So what is environmental storytelling? Well, environmental storytelling is, it's like we have an activity. So I want you guys to take a look at this slide and tell me, what does this picture tell you of the inhabitants of the house? Just some impressions. Feel free to shout them out.
They're not very clean.
Yeah, a lot of trash. It's very messy. What can you assume, like the people, like the character traits of the people that live in this house?
They're careless.
Careless.
They could also be hoarding.
They could have a very specific interest in hoarding garbage. Yeah. What else?
They're probably busy.
Yeah. Definitely. So it's either they're lazy because they can't bother to clean, or they're very busy, which means they don't have time to clean. Anything else?
They're sleeping all the time.
They're sleeping all the time. That could be something, yeah.
They have a working job.
Yes, maybe they have to commute like 2 hours and spend all their time at the office. And maybe that's why this is so dirty.
Someone destroyed the place.
Someone destroyed the place. That is interesting, yeah. That also could be what happens.
They have some kind of pet, or maybe used to.
Ooh,
Yeah.
used to.
Maybe a pet destroyed. Destroyed this place, made it all messy.
Zombies.
Zombies. Yeah, it could be like a zombie apocalypse situation. Bunch of garbage. We don't know the outside, so that is, yeah. So basically, what that was environmental storytelling. So from a single picture, we can convey information to the player or the viewer. And like we basically can make assumptions about what the people's situations are, like their personality, what they're going through. So that's basically environmental storytelling, the definition. So it's using art, the art of using the environment to tell a story. So people, like you guys just did, will pick up meaning based off the environment of like a game. And so it can be used to give subtle clues or information about a narrative. Like if you have certain objects or letters in like a game world, the player might be able to like look at it or read it. And that could give a lot of clues about like what's happening in the world, like the situation, the events, the main like plot of the world. And it lets players piece together a narrative themselves. I think this is an underrated part of environmental storytelling, where like it's not directly told to you, so like you can have your own interpretation about. I need to speak closer to the mic. You can have your own interpretations about what the story could be, and like what characters are going through, like what you think the characters are. And this is done unconsciously, and people, the more like environmental storytelling stuff you have in the game, the more they'll be immersed, despite like not really having a full like Game of Thrones level plot or something like that. You can have a lot of great environmental storytelling, and that could do a lot for a story. But why is it important? It's important because first, it helps avoid unnecessary and tedious exposition or information dumps. I'm sure you guys have seen
like mediocre movies or games where like there's a lot of information just told to you by like a character in the story, and it's like not very engaging. And then the character just like says it to like the main character or something, and you don't really get to experience the world. You're just getting told the world, which is not as effective as just learning through like the world itself. And so, yeah, players will notice bad exposition and get agitated. Anyone would. And it can make more sense narratively. There are some situations where like notes in terms of like objects, like letters, books in the world that have information on them. Sometimes they don't make sense narratively, but you can still include them. And players don't have to read as much. It depends on the game. If it's like a first person 3D world where they can like pick up objects and look at stuff and read stuff, then you don't want to like overload the player with like a ton of stuff to read, a ton of like descriptions and history. Sometimes it's better to just let the history bleed in from the world itself through just environmental design and like I said before, just objects. It could be anything. Yeah. And this allows them to focus more on gameplay itself, which can be good for your game for engagement. It also result in like good aha moments. Like if you, for example, if you pose a question at like the start of a story about what happened to someone or something, and then if the player plays through the game, and around the halfway point they see like a skeleton or something, then you can probably like assume like the character, like the thing, has probably died because of that placement of the skeleton. And so that's like an aha moment for players where like you don't have to, yeah. And then it can also help characterize characters where your character could have changes throughout the story as well in terms of their character design, like the way they dress, the way they look, like how tired they look and stuff like that as they move through like certain areas of the level or the game. And that could like really help just help your character writing and just like help the players get more immersed in the game. So where do we put environmental storytelling stuff? In the environment, so basically just the world, like you put stuff on the ground, the buildings, chairs, furniture, like anything, and objects, tables, chairs, furniture, weapons, just anything that like exists in a game world. Depending on the genre of your game, like if it's a fantasy game, then you'll probably have like more fantasy objects, or like maybe magical objects or weapons. If it's like a real world inspired game, you'll probably just have like real world stuff. And yeah, like I said before, you can do it in characters as well. So if there's a visual element to something that can be used to suggest something, it can also be used for environmental storytelling. Okay. So why is environmental storytelling so effective? I think it's really effective because of this age-old narrative device called show don't tell. I assume you guys have heard of this phrase before. If you haven't, it's basically a narrative technique where you show the reader, the player, or viewer what's happening instead of just telling them directly. And the reason why this is so effective is because it's more immersive and it gets the player more emotionally engaged with the story. So an example is like in writing is like this. So if you were to tell the player something like this example, if you want to say the parties were dazzling and opulent, or like the party was like so grand in scale and stuff, you just say that and then the player would know. But if you want to show the player, you would say something like, you would describe more like of the environment and the people there and what they're doing. So in this example, you see it says, in his blue gardens, men and girls came and went like moths. among the whisperings and the champagne and the stars. The last swimmers have come in from the beach now and are dressing upstairs. The cars from New York are parked 5 deep in the drive. Floating rounds of cocktails permeate the garden outside. The lights grow brighter as the earth lurches away from the sun, and now the orchestra is playing yellow cocktail music, and the opera of voices pitches a key higher. So obviously the bottom version is much more engaging and immersive. Like you can kind of picture the world better than just the top version. Like instead of saying it's nighttime, the sentence, the lights grow brighter as the earth lurches away the sun. You can pick up on the fact that it's probably like sunset, and then the lights of the party like are brighter as the sun sets, and just more environmental stuff with describing just the gardens and just more detail. And so that's why it's like so effective. It's much more engaging and immersive. So here are some examples from like games. We have a generic example. You guys have probably seen this a lot of times where it's like you're a soldier. The game, if you're playing like an FPS game, the game tells you to meet up at some location so you can meet Bravo Squad or something. And then you show up and then there's like bodies strewn all over the place. And so you can probably make a pretty easy conclusion from that. They're dead, obviously, and something killed them. And so you probably will have to encounter that thing and either like fight the thing or run away from it. It's kind of like a setup. And you know this because of the game decides to show you that the soldiers were killed instead of just telling you it in like exposition or something like that. Here's another example. Sorry for the bad crop. So in this game, Gone Home, have you guys heard of it? So yeah, in the game, you play as the older sister of the family, and you recently returned from like a trip abroad. And so when you explore the house, you see like stuff like this, like detail in the house to kind of have just immerse the player much more, because this house that the player explores is like an old family house that has like been has existed for like generations. And you know this because you see Terry is the character that the player's father, and you can see that they grew up in the house due to like the height marks on the wall. And you can see that the father is like this tall in 1957 at age 6, and then you can see them gradually grow up as they get older and become like a teen. So like just not a lot of words, not a lot of like detailed imagery, and you can do a lot with like just this. Like there's so much, like you can imagine like probably this kid growing up in this house and what it probably would have been like. So just like a lot of story that you can put with just like a tiny bit of visual storytelling and environmental storytelling. Another example, Firewatch. I'm assuming you guys know Firewatch as well. One of the most popular like story-based games. So this location is Brian's hideout. So you see on the left image, like it's kind of like a small, I wouldn't say cave, but it's like there's shade, and then you can like kind of chill here. There's like an area. And so in the game, there's a character called Brian, and in this hideout is where like Brian used to like hide out from his father. And you can search like the area and you would find like his notebooks, like his toys, I think like his science homework and stuff like that. And that just like shows so much story. And it's like the game is really about the son Brian and like his father, and like them trying to repair their relationship. And so like this really adds to the story because you see like a lot of like Brian's personality. Like in the game Firewatch, you don't really see Brian like at all. And so like this stuff is like really important for like adding personality to Brian and like making him seem like a real person, like a real kid with like personality and like dreams and interests. Yeah, and it directly like adds to the narrative. This is probably one of the best uses of environmental storytelling. Another one, I guess the character aspect of environmental storytelling. I'm assuming you guys have heard of The Last of Us as well. But even if you didn't, like even if you've never heard of this game, you can probably see the difference. Like if I told you like this was the same character, you could probably like think of possible reasons or possible things that this character has gone through in the game. Does anyone not know Last of Us Part 2? Okay, so yeah, like you guys probably know, but so Abby, this is Abby at like the start of the game, and then there was like a time skip. She gets captured by like slavers, and then you see the result here. She has lost a lot of weight and muscle. Her hair is like cut, and then she's like very sunburned because like I think she was like captured and like tied up outside, and so just like through visuals, you can tell like what the character has gone through. Okay, so how do we actually like do environmental storytelling in our games? So we want to intentionally design and plan it. And this is and to do that, we need to talk with our team because they need to know what you want in order to make what you need. So basically, if you have an idea for like maybe an object or maybe like a level that has environmental storytelling in it, then you need to talk with the game designers and the artists because the artists will be actually making like the art assets in the level. And so they need to know like what this thing looks like. Do I need to add like maybe blood stains somewhere to show like something? Do I need to add like signs of a struggle, broken tree branches, stuff like that? And so you want to talk with your team. That's like probably like the most important thing as a writer or like a narrative designer when working on a game. They need to know what you want to do, and you need to tell them like, hey, I need this in the game, and this is actually achievable, and it's not too out of scope. And so after you just plan of an idea, check with the game designers and see if it's like it makes sense in the game and it works well, then they'll probably like implement it. And there's going to be iteration and you want to polish it. And scope is very important because you don't want to, it's good to tell a good story, but sometimes you're limited by scope a lot. Like for the games that we make in college, we probably only have 10 weeks, maybe if you're in capstone, 20 weeks at most to make a game. And that's not really a lot of time. So you can't really make a lot of grand set pieces or like have a ton of like art assets. So you have to like be very efficient and very thoughtful with what you're writing, what you're writing is and what you need to put like in your game to tell the best story you can. So like maybe set up an object at the start of the story or the game, and then maybe reference it near the middle or something. And so with one object, you can have that emotional impact without just using like stuff that can get out of scope. Like you don't want to ask for just a huge, I don't know, like a woodland level with like a bunker and like fully explorable bunkers because you're probably not going to make that in 10 weeks or like 20 weeks. So yeah, just keep that in mind while brainstorming of stuff. And it's also highly dependent on level design. You want to make sure that it doesn't conflict with level design where like you want the player to obviously see the environmental stuff that you're trying to say, but you don't want it to maybe it doesn't fit the level design. You don't want it to be shoved in a corner where like no one actually ever sees it. So you want to make sure you and level design are on the same page with that. So more tidbits. This is like more technical stuff. So basically when we build a level, we can guide the player to like do what we want them to do, but we've only built the stage and the player has control over like what they actually do, like what areas they explore, what areas they like move to. So consider the path where the player has to go in order to complete like the objective in the game at that moment. And so once you do that, you think of like places where you should put like environmental objects or things for the most impact. Yeah, so place details where players can see them. You don't want them to be secret unless like it's an Easter egg, and you're intending it to never be found. And so yeah, assume the player has read little to nothing about what they're doing and the context behind it, because like sometimes players miss things and you don't want to like have this really specific detail or something that they can't really pick up because they've missed maybe something earlier in the game. And so with props or like objects in the game, use prop placement, character positioning to get across the information that they might have missed. And sketching out like a rough idea will also help your team. Like if you sketch out a drawing of the area, maybe like a top-down drawing, and like you place the object in the level, that would really help out the game designers in like building the levels and making sure your environmental stuff gets in the game. All right. I think we will have 20 minutes to do this last activity. So basically think of like any game idea in your head. It doesn't have to be like a current game or something, just something you make up. Like a knight in a fantasy RPG world, or maybe a lone survivor in an apocalyptic world. And I want you guys to just write a scene in the game and just use only environmental descriptions to tell the player something. So that something can be something story-wise, something character-wise, or like information that the player needs to know. So nothing too heavy, so around a paragraph long. I want, I guess, good detail. So yeah. Once you're done, please post your paragraph in the writing section of the Discord. And yeah, happy writing.
share it in the hashtag writing channel.
How do I stop the recording?
What?
How do I stop the recording?
You just
Zoom
stop the
people.
stream.
Okay. Like the. Like Zoom meeting? 'Cause everyone
Well, I mean,
left.
You could end there.
Okay.
Where's the hint?
That'd be cool.
I probably should end it.
Okay.
Wait, say goodbye.
No, the Zoom people already left.
Oh.